just a couple of years working as a bike shop employee and meeting many and a racer. He comes to it with a knowledge of the bike more than I'll ever have. So I've just appreciated Justin's skill set and being able to change people on the bike. So I'm learning every day from you, Justin.
Thanks, Curtis. All right, so let's get into this here. We just and again, thanks to everybody for the questions. I have my little chat window open up here so I can see what people are saying, and there's a couple that I'm going to be ticking on as we roll through those areas in the lecture here. So, but we got somebody who needs to mute. There we go. Perfect. Nope, still echoing.
Thanks everybody for continuing to mute as you come on. We'll probably need to remind people as that continues to happen.
Yeah, it's not a webinar, unfortunately, but I'm just glad to be able to talk with everyone. What we've got here up on the screen is the classic change in emphasis. The performance is the focus of everybody that rides in some level or another. Ultimately, we like riding bikes because we like riding bikes, and there's a lot of other things that are associated with being comfortable and healthy and strong as people and in life and on the bike. And what ends up happening a lot of times, though, is that drive for performance, that drive to reach the sharp end of peak fitness results in inverting what should be the usual order of the pyramid, where you've got, oops, I went the wrong way. You've got, health, which should be on the base of the pyramid, barely even really a consideration, and all the focus goes into performance. So, the real key, and one of the things that we have opportunity to do now that there's more time sometimes with a lot of people aren't commuting by car anymore. We have more space to be able to focus on some of the things that are really going on at the base of the pyramid, focusing on sleep and nutrition and stress and good movement habits, not slouching when you're sitting, learning more about how to efficiently move and comfortably move, and just everything that comes together to make you a healthy person in life as well as on the bike. And identifying things that are in there that limit your ability to function well. Obviously, our focus today is on bike fit as one of those limiters. We're going to mention a few areas. There's 5 exercises that are going to be coming up here that Curtis will talk about that really help get into body limiters in the same way that the bike is a limiter. If your saddle's really low, it's hard to generate power on the bike. But if your hamstrings are really tight, then maybe you can't raise the saddle. So you have to balance that inquiry into, is it the bike? Is it the body? More often than not, it's a combination of both of those things. It's really a synthesis of how we interact with this constrained mechanical item that we all have chosen to ride on. And obviously, fitness is an important part of the pyramid as well. Everybody's really experienced that if we're all bike racing. We've got coaches, or we've worked with coaches. We've got power meters. We know how to do that. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, you come to performance. But you're not going to be able to get to that point in the pyramid if you don't take care of the base of it. It's just not going to have a strong foundation. And one of the things that comes up is recognizing that there are certain aspects of the fit, certain aspects of your body that create, as you can see here, a strong dysfunction. It's an intersection of what's going on, and you can start to see something's not going right in this picture. There's twisting, there's instability on the saddle. The next step is to start asking questions about why is that happening. And so one of the things you can look at, mobility and flexibility. We're gonna have a few exercises that are gonna really help address that. Really getting into a broader sense of what is the core and how the core is activated. It's when your core isn't functioning properly, then you start to see things happen on the bike that are indicating that you're not moving efficiently. The kind of twisting that you can see going on here, you can see the dots twisting side to side. That's not a stable saddle position. That's not going to be comfortable for the back. It's not going to be comfortable on the saddle. So what can we do to start getting into a way to link the core into good form on the bike? Whoops. Let's go to the next thing here. And then so we can start to look at what are the bike limiters. You can look at seat height. You can look at the fore-aft position of the saddle. Look at the bar position, too far away, too low, too high, too close. All sorts of different things. Cleat position is a vastly complex area. Twisted cleats, too far forward on the shoe, all kinds of issues will come up to it. Or then the hamstrings come into play as a counterbalancer to the limitations of what you're doing on the bike. And so just coming back to that idea, it's building a strong, healthy base, and bike fit is a big part of that. Body health and mobility and strength is a big part of that. So the classic position, we see people sitting like this all the time, working on our computers. We're stuck indoors. It's a lot of slouching. And then what you'll see is that exact same position ends up translating over onto the bike. And I know I was with Curtis, when you see this kind of situation, what's your usual thought process on that?
So many times people just expect to hop on the bike and they expect to have a long torso and open up their diaphragm so they can breathe, and they expect to be able to really get an efficient position on the bike, when one of my favorite lines is, the body is cement waiting to harden. And when we sit in one position all day long on the computer, on our laptop, we get stuck there, we get hardened in that position, and then you hop on the bike and we don't have the option of being able to get in a more efficient or powerful place, because our joints are stuck there, our muscles are stuck there. And so we really need to look at our ergonomics, not only on the bike, but off the bike, if you're really looking for, efficiency and a good posture on the bike. So think about both, and all of these things, really interrelate, and particularly as we sit at home staring at a Zoom screen.
Definitely. Yeah, it's we've all kind of hardened into that position, and then as soon as you get onto the bike, it's not going to go away just because you change the context. It's finding a way to build a balanced set of tension within your body, and so the wheel is actually a really good example of that. I think Curtis has used the word in the past, tensegrity. It's the integrity of the system under tension. But if one of those spokes is off, if it's slightly out of true, then you lose that ability, that balance, and you can find the same kind of distribution of stress as distribution of tension in the body. And if one of those things goes out of whack, you'll see you're going to have a tacoed wheel, just like you're going to have a tacoed leg or a tacoed back from having too much tension. And so one of the things that we try to do is we try to find, where are the brakes dragging in the system? What in your body is creating a limiter that's inhibiting your performance? And so sometimes you'll see an example like in this case, where the neutral position for the rider is significantly different once he puts load on the knee. And so ideally, when you load up, as the fellow in the blue shirt does, that the ankle, the knee, and the hip are relatively in alignment. But as you can see, the rider on the right, that's not the case. The ankle and the knee are in one line, and the hips are way over on the other side. That's a tension out of alignment. That's that tacoed wheel. You've got a tacoed hip, you end up having a tacoed back. you're going to be putting a lot of load through that system, and the tension, the balance of strength is just not in balance. So it doesn't allow for a even healthy distribution of power. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this before. He's not just a really good sprinter. There's a lot that goes into being strong on the bike, and being able to have this kind of flexibility, strength, and mobility is certainly an important factor to. I love the guy pointing at him at the end there. It's pretty impressive. And one of the things that we do to kind of help check into that is, can we get some echoing in there? I think we're okay. Is do a video check-in. We've been doing this really frequently with the pandemic in place. People are restricted in their movements, but we can still connect via video, and we can still do a little bit of checking in here. I'm just going to play a quick little snippet of this. Oops, that's not what I wanted to happen. Oh, that's just a picture. There's an actual video later. And we can assess how things look in the video. It's a great way to sort of look at some of those things that are limiting, restricting mobility. And this is an example of basically what that cement is. It's that connective tissue. It's the way the whole body, when it's not put in motion, starts to just gradually lock up. And you'll see this when you look at cadavers. There's a lot of evidence that this kind of tissue buildup drastically restricts movements, and it's allowing for efficient alignment, efficient movement, smooth movement of the muscles and joints without that kind of restriction. So this kind of fuzzy stuff that grows up between the muscles and the skin, definitely something you want to avoid. So you don't want to get stuck in ruts of movement is ultimately what it comes down to. And when you think back to that X-ray of the person sitting at the computer and the person sitting on the bike, that's you get stuck in that position. You get stuck there. It's incredible how quickly that kind of movement pattern gets imprinted on our brains. And it takes significant effort to kind of break out of that rut, much like it would take effort to get this car out of that rut. It's an important aspect of the path to better performance and comfort on the bike. So we can move towards that. And start to reprogram the brain. And then that's a critical element, is being able to get everything coordinated. We talk about a lot of times you'll do neuromuscular training on the bike, high pedaling, high cadence pedaling drills. But it's really what the kind of thing that we're talking about. But then when you start getting down at a really granular level, it's getting all muscles firing in coordination, so that when you get set up right on the bike, the things are still working the right way. Because you can have the perfect bike fit, but if things are off on your body, then perfect is really not something that's achievable, and it's only achievable in the abstract. In reality, the imperfect person on this perfect machine is going to create problems. And this is a good example. This is Curtis. I think you can probably tell this story a little bit better than me, since you interacted with him.
So this athlete, and you'll know him in a moment. Yeah, there we go. This athlete believed that he was sitting in center. He had no clue. What you can obviously see is his torso was tipped. And he would tell me that, when the quote stars are aligned, I'm able to push through my right leg. And as you can watch him move, he had the ability to get over to his left side, but he couldn't actually elongate and push down through his right side. He was compressed, he was shortened, he had an old fracture that limited his coordination, his brain's ability to push down through his right side. He'd had lots and lots of treatment to improve his mobility, but what Justin was just talking about is the neuromuscular coordination in order to be able to fire. So his door of mobility was open, but he didn't have the, if you will, the software in order to figure out how to connect his foot to his low back to his trunk. And so I'm going to hit the next button for me, Justin. And so we asked this question: why might an athlete gets lots of care, and he had a lot of care, hit the next button, but still sit on the bike twisted, and then hit it again, sit on the bike twisted and say to me, he was only able to use his leg when the stars were aligned. Well, this athlete, going to hit the button again, this athlete found out when he reloaded his software, when we did a lot of neuromuscular coordination, reprogrammed, if you will, he was able to take the next step. Go ahead and hit the next button for me, onto the podium, quite literally. And you guys might now recognize Christian, and I have permission to use that. And he just found that the coordination aspect of all of it, the retraining, was key once the door of mobility was opened up.
Awesome. Yeah, it's pretty incredible to see that. You can see Christian at the start in that picture of him slouching to one side, and in his mind that was straight. And so it's getting that software reloaded, realigning, reconnecting, recoordinating how we move and how we think about our movement patterns. You can see with this fellow standing here, stability versus instability in the sense of the lack of alignment. And what does it take to get to from the aligned position to the misaligned position? And how do we get away from that kind of potentially problematic position? Because ultimately what we want to be able to do is fire the cannons that are our legs in bike races. But if we don't have the right support, if we're not mounting that cannon on a battleship, then we're not going to be able to effectively fire. We are instead mounting a cannon on a canoe, and nothing is going to happen. We're going to be moving all over the place, rocking all over the place, unstable, and ultimately leading into potentially getting injured. Curtis, thoughts on the core?
Yeah, in short, this is really meant to point out that our core just isn't the six pack down the center. And most people do lots of crunches and planks, and they wake up and they get really strong in their ability to crunch. And we don't do a lot of crunches on the bike, or at least I don't. But our core is really this idea of a wrap around system, the front and the back of us working together. And the wrap around being much like a corset that when it's squeezes us, it creates that battleship, as Justin was talking about. It creates a elongation that connects our rib cage to our pelvis, and then that gives us the power to be able to hinge forward and drop our weight into the pedal, as opposed to round our back if we're just doing a whole lot of abdominal, rectus abdominis crunches, six pack on the bike. So this is really meant to point out the trunk as a whole, and how even those transverse abdominals that wrap around literally tie into your low back. They connect to the transverse processes of your lumbar spine, and they literally connect the front to the back of you. So as you start to think about core training, know that it's not just about the crunches and the planks.
Cool.
As a matter of fact, it's sorry, I'll go there for a second and hit this slide. As a matter of fact, as you think about the core, don't just think about it as the trunk, the deep muscles, but thinking about it as the core of the hip and the core of the foot. Define the core instead of as abdominal muscles. Define the core of a joint as the deep muscles that are responsible for the quality movement in the joint. Not responsible for creating the motion or the power, but responsible for creating the battleship at a deep level and making sure that the joint moves well, and that the form in the joint is such that you're not going to get impingement, you're not going to get compression, and the big power muscles can effectively deliver force. So the core of the hip, the deep hip rotators, the core of the foot, the intrinsic muscles of the foot, the core of the shoulder, the rotator cuff. So start to redefine core as a type of muscle, the deep quality intrinsic form muscles, and then the battleship, the power muscles over top of those, over top of those smaller quality muscles.
Excellent. Yeah. So that's one of the things that we really talk about a lot when we're connecting with people in a video, having a fit in person, whatever it is really talking about how you move and trying to find ways to improve the quality of movement, whether that's through cueing, through bike fit, through physical therapy, whichever route it is that needs work. We're going to try to find a way to get there so that you can change those routes, get into an efficient, happy rut as opposed to a disgusting, muddy trench. And I mean, we can briefly talk about that. I think we can kind of get into this later. There's some stuff on the glutes later. Mm-hmm. We'll get there in a sec. And so just as I said, the body's a huge part of this, and I never want anybody to think that bike fit is a panacea for things that are going wrong on the bike. The times in my life when I've been the strongest and happiest on the bike are when I had a really balanced and deep off bike routine. It's incredibly important, but that doesn't mean that bike fit isn't important. Bike fit is critical. Bike fit is a absolutely important variable to making sure that you are powerful and are comfortable. So there's several things that we can address here, because the bike we can change. So even in a situation where there are issues, there's a lack of mobility, there's a pretty broad range of ways that we can accommodate that on the bike. And we're gonna go through the fit, and we're gonna look at where things are. Do you have that classic hunchback position from sitting in front of a computer all day? It's not just going to go away when you get onto the bike and put a really long stem on it. It's going to be something that you need to look at in terms of how we build the whole fit around the way your body works. And it's also keyed into what you want to do on the bike. For bike racing, then we start to develop more ambitious goals for the body work that's going to go in off the bike to help meet the bike position and bike performance and optimization goals that you may have on the bike. So the first step is to accommodate the body as presented. We're going to, put on maybe we have to flip the stem. Maybe we have to put a shorter stem on. It's, who knows what the exact situation is. We've got a lot of tibial turnout. The feet tend to point really far, dramatically away from the body. We might need to go with a longer pedal spindle. I've got really tight hip flexors. We may need to raise the bars. We're going to do something to try to get you comfortable now. But then the next step is to get into a program where you can help evolve the body to get to a point where you're going to be working towards those goals. The same way you'd work towards fitness goals, working towards body goals, and working towards bike fit goals. And then you come back, and then we reassess. And it's this process. It's an iteration going through change over time, because bike fit is not a one and done process. It's a way of working with the rider to try to bring those goals to fruition in the bike that you're trying to do fitness wise. But this is the way to do it in terms of the biomechanics of the bike. So for our purposes, these are kind of the 5 core things we're going to be looking at on the bike. I think we'll probably be able to get to 4 of these tonight. I think cleats and shoes are almost a whole lecture in and of themselves. So we've got saddle type, saddle position, and your kind of cockpit torso angle situation, which can be summed up through crank length and stem position. So that's offset, length, and how high the bars are relative to the saddle. And so looking at saddles, I think, everybody's pretty familiar with this. There's a lot of different options out there in the saddle realm. Saddles are really interesting. This is a very, very true statement. It doesn't matter how comfortable the saddle is if the position isn't good. But by the same token, a lot of times what is perceived as a bad or uncomfortable saddle is a result of a bad fit. And so it's it really kind of works in tandem, and trying to find a way to build a position that makes you comfortable, supports your weight, distributes weight well, and then start to reassess the saddle. This is an example here of pressure mapping, a three-dimensional rendering of pressure on the saddle with a cutout. And you can choose those kind of variables. So the cutout helps distribute pressure away from the center of the perineum. The width helps better support the bony structures in the pelvis. The common way to look at that would be the sit bone width. There's all kinds of different impression tests that can be done to help measure that. But that's really more of a starting off point when it comes to choosing a saddle. What we found is really the gold standard is pressure mapping, particularly in bike racing. You're really not sitting on the sit bones. You've rotated your pelvis forward to at least some extent, and are sitting on the pubic rami, which are the forward portions coming forward from the base of the sit bone toward the front part of the pelvis, which are significantly narrower. And so, yeah, it's a starting point to be able to look at width via sit bones. But the reality is that the best way to really gauge how you sit on the saddle is to measure it using pressure mapping. The shape of the saddle is also important as well. The curvature of the top side to side, the shape forward, backward. Sometimes they have a scoop. These all come into play, and there's a little bit of experimentation that goes into it. There's also a little bit of sort of sussing out what the goals are relative to the position. But ultimately, that's kind of the inquiry. And then padding is also an important consideration. I think there's a sense in racing that lighter weight, less padding is sort of necessarily better, but it isn't necessarily better. A lot of times the padding can very functionally help redistribute pressure, and you'll see it in the pressure mapping. And being uncomfortable in the saddle is a sure way to reduce performance. And so looking at the variables in the saddle, the tilt of the saddle is really critical. It can really dramatically change how and where you sit on the saddle. Going from this situation of sitting bolt upright, very vertical pelvis, with most of that pressure loaded on the sit bones, to a rotated forward position, more of the classic racing type setup. And you can see that the saddle angle can be a critical variable in how you change that position. It can encourage you to rotate the pelvis forward, but then there's also a balance on that of making sure that you're not so far forward that you end up basically just putting all of your weight on your hands. Not to beat on this, but coming back to the pressure mapping, really being able to help balance out that aspect of it super effectively, to be able to get a comfortable position that isn't putting pressure on soft tissue, that's supporting you when you pedal. Mission critical. All right. What do we got here? The broad category of it here. So this is that quick video I'd mentioned earlier. I think this is a really good one. Let's see if this goes. Oh, okay.
Justin, turn that up just a bit, or comment over top of it.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, I mean, we can, if the audio is not coming through there, sorry about that.
It was just a little low.
Yeah. You can see Chris is doing a forward bend here, looking primarily at the back's mobility. And this also gives us a sense of hamstring mobility and how the pelvis moves. And it's a great way to kind of filter into a multifaceted approach to trying to figure out where the saddle should optimally be. In that forward position, even in this position as well, you can see limitations in shoulder mobility. You can see limitations in back mobility. It's a really effective way to start getting a gauge of where you need to be placing the saddle. This is one of the tests we would do in person. The straight leg raise on the table, trying to figure out how mobile and how effectively your hamstrings will work for the saddle position. Let's see here. Oops. We'll come back to that in a sec. Let's see.
And Justin, this might be a nice opportunity if you're good with it to grab a question or two. So let's see. I think I'm going to scroll back up to the beginning because that's a nice one that's kind of goes into this body testing and mobility wise, and particularly when people have bodies that are relatively asymmetrical. And the question is, I'm 5'10" with a 31-inch inseam, and that hits me kind of personally because I'm 5'10" with a 30-inch inseam, a la a very long torso. Eugene, I totally get it. My effective torso length is even longer, but because I have extreme pelvic rotation, a lot they tilt very far forward. And again, this hits me personally again. Should this have any influence on saddle fore aft? I've heard some fitters say that people with long torsos need more saddle setback to improve their center of gravity on the bike. I've always been of the mindset the saddle position should be set primarily on leg length. I assume they're talking about basically knee over pedal spindle, while torso length should be addressed with a longer front center. It kind of fits in nicely here if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, no, yeah. Thanks for the question, Eugene. Really appreciate that. I think that they really are. That there's two things going on there. It's there's saddle position and saddle height, which are really important. You want to find a saddle position that works with your mobility. So saddle height, but the setback, there's a slide that's going to be coming up a little bit later where we're going to talk about that in a little bit of detail too. But the center of mass aspect of it is really important and should also be checked in conjunction with this. But I don't think it necessarily is a good idea to say just per se that the saddle should be farther back. It should be in the position that lets you balance effectively and distribute your weight effectively on the bike. It should let you get into a comfortable, biomechanically efficient position for pedaling. And I think that your point at the end is ultimately where you would go is you start looking at that the longer front center, whether that's a longer stem or a longer frame. That kind of build, shorter legs, longer torso tends to fit classic pro geometry pretty well. That long, low, stem slammed geometry that everybody wishes they could ride on. But that there's a reason that it's set up like that. A lot of pros tend to have that kind of build. So that would be where my brain goes on that one. Curtis, did you have any thoughts on it?
Nope, love it. I would agree with that compliment of using center of mass over bottom bracket as one feedback loop, but also making sure that your knee over the pedal spindle is a way to produce power as another feedback loop, and not relying on one or the other. Most clients do a little bit better in my experience with knee over pedal spindle ish, but always checking it against where your center of your body is over the bike for especially handling of the bike. So it's this split between the two and being mindful of both. And that's a nice question to go deeper in it with Eugene. It'd be great to have that conversation even offline.
Yep,
then let's pick up one more, which is spindle length and the stance width questions. Actually, that one's coming up a little bit later on as well. Spindle length, road is narrower. Spindle length we're going to hit a little bit later. I'm sorry. I'm gonna pause on that one. Sean and a couple of people have brought that up. So let's keep going. Sounds great.
Okay, cool. So saddle height, like we were just talking about. This is a retail report from fitting done for Tom Danielson. Looking at the angles, this bike probably not optimal leg extension. We're going to look for something a little bit taller. But it's really looking at the two measurements down here of that knee angle at extension of 35 degrees. That really being kind of one of the key elements here, as well as the knee angle at maximal flexion at the top of the pedal stroke. So it's trying to get a focus on where that relates to your mobility limitations. And so you're going to know generally that if you have relatively mobile hamstrings, relatively good straight leg reads from that table test, that you're going to be able to get away with a little bit straighter leg. And 35 degrees dynamically, and this is a dynamic measurement, is going to be a pretty relatively straight leg. And this is another way to look at it here. We've got analysis in a Peloton video. Oops, I went backwards. Come back. Where's my video? So one of the things that we can do with the video stuff is be able to look at that knee angle using some online analysis software. So it's not just looking at somebody in the video and kind of guesstimating. You can actually pretty well drill down into where how they're sitting on a bike, even on a Peloton bike, and get a good sense of where the saddle should be and be able to make some dynamic changes in that context. Same thing here. This is what we would be doing in person using the motion metric motion capture software, high frame rate cameras, being able to get the body markers on there. Obviously, we can get a higher level of precision in this context. It's really good for making really small changes. But these are the two numbers that were coming out of that Tommy Danielson's fit report there too. You can see getting that, in this case, about a 38 degree maximal extension number, but even more open at the top. And this is actually a case, this is a short crank arm scenario. These are 165s. And one of the benefits of that is being able to get to this knee angle that's relatively open at the top of the pedal stroke. And let's see here. Right, and so this is what we were just talking about with Eugene in terms of the knee over pedal spindle. There's the classic way to measure it would be to drop a plumb bob from the knee. And in this case, a little bit sitting behind the pedal spindle. Sometimes there would be a temptation to maybe move forward. But in this case, you can also do a center of mass check relative to the bottom bracket, which in this case is pretty well aligned. And so even though there is a little bit of, in a traditional sense, what would be sitting back, center of mass gives you feedback that actually is a potentially successful place to sit. Weight is distributed really effectively between the wheels. And so the key here is being able to get things working. Let's see, what do we have here? Where are we time-wise? Okay.
It might be worth just grabbing a couple more questions as we jump into the next section. Spindle length, which from both Bill and from Christopher, kind of pulling them together. What is your take on spindle length for pedals? There was another one in there, and the differential mountain versus road spindle length or stance width, essentially. Thoughts about spindle length and stance width, and then go there first.
Yeah, obviously the stance width on a road bike is significantly narrower than it is on a mountain bike. Seen a lot of really interesting writing and thinking about trying to get to a wider stance width on a road bike. Road bikes just sort of are what they are. They have a relatively narrow stance width. That's one of the variables that isn't really precisely done in terms of trying to match stance width exactly to the bike fit. But the option is there to do it. It's one thing to think of. It isn't one of the first variables that you come to. There's a lot of other things in a bike position that will be much stronger influencers in your comfort and power. But one of the areas where you do see a very big impact in spindle width is scenarios where there's either tight hamstrings, or I should say tight hips, where it restricts the ability of the hip to flex at the top of the pedal stroke. And frequently the symptom there is that the knee will move away from the bike at the top of the pedal stroke. And the longer pedal spindle can help bring the foot out to the misaligned position. It's a way to accommodate tight hips. It's also a way to accommodate somebody who has a foot that points quite dramatically away from their body. In both of those scenarios, a wider stance width is definitely helpful, and something that would directly be important. In terms of switching between the two, this has come up in some prior scenarios. I think, if you're racing cross country and you're racing on the road, it can be a little bit of a jarring transition. Sometimes it can be nice to try to take down the Q factor a little bit, or the stance width a little bit on the mountain bike, keeping the cleats in maybe a slightly different position, or using non-extended pedals, certainly, and maybe going to an extended pedal on the road bike.
And I would say the opposite can be true as well for Sean, who the road is narrower than on the mountain bike. And Q factor and stance width, those words are pretty interchangeable. Q factor being a little more specific. Sean says, I have varus issues, knees coming together, and he feels better on his mountain bike. He asked the question, since he feels better on his mountain bike, should he add extenders to the road bike in order to make it more mountain bike like? And in short, probably what's happening because of the challenges in feet and knee and pelvis here, the extra width makes him feel better, and generally when you feel better, you produce more power as well. So I would say the answer is probably yes, Sean. We need to look at you live, but usually when people feel better, they have better biomechanics, and now that your body prefers wider stances, going a little bit wider. So basically, one of my favorite expressions is, if you're not assessing, you're guessing. And so if we're not assessing your biomechanics, we don't know whether you need to go wider or narrower, but it's a variable that's really important that can make a huge difference: power and comfort and long-term injury. Thanks.
Awesome. So the next thing in terms of bike fit variables we usually like to get to is torso angle. Like I had said before, crank length is a big variable here, trying to keep that knee from being too bent to the top of the pedal stroke, trying to keep the hip from being too bent at the top of the pedal stroke. And particularly for people who are bike racing, the crank length is a variable that can be really, really helpful. It lets you get into a lower, more aggressive position with fewer consequences. And there really is no trade-off in terms of power. There's sometimes a little bit of an adaptation in terms of getting used to how it feels pedaling, but by and large, it's a very significant variable that can impact things like how the hip moves while pedaling, and you can see that sometimes at the top of the pedal stroke, the hip will lift up off the saddle, and that's what's happening here because of a little bit of impact from crank arm. And so that's something that can be helped with a shorter crank arm length. And the other variable that's present there also is the stem and reach to the bars in general. Trying to accommodate relatively tight hips, you want to make sure that the hip can pretty comfortably get close to touching the chest. And because if not, in a traditional road racing position, you're going to be running into some problems. And so a lot of times what you'll end up doing is And in this case, what we can see is a failure of coordination, a failure of balance, a failure of strength, of being able to get into a comfortable knee position or a hip position. And this would be a signal that potentially going to a higher handlebar position, or even sometimes a shorter handlebar position, might be a beneficial place to go. And so looking at this rider here, you can see the difference that getting into a more comfortable handlebar position makes. That arched back, his neck is sticking out, versus much more relaxed and neutral looking, a little bit higher, a little bit longer. And there's more room for the torso to open up. There's more room to get away from that kind of hunched, computer-driven position that we all adopt far, far too frequently. And one of the ways that we would check that is the testing hip flexion on the table. It's similar to the way we would test hamstring flexibility on the table, looking to make sure the range of motion is good. I don't know if this is going to come through or not. Let's see.
It comes through. Just get your mic a little bit closer to the volume, or turn your volume up a bit.
Is that coming through?
Just barely. I think what I'll do is just talk over it.
Okay.
Oops. So as she comes over the top of the pedal stroke on the left-hand side, her pelvis gets pushed over to the right there. I'm kind of exaggerating it. But what you'll see in a moment is when she unclips and starts to do a backward leg pedaling. So you'll see the differential between the two. So as she unclips on her left side, you can see the relative smoothness of the efficiency of how her right clip or her right hip clears the top of the pedal stroke. She has good hip mobility over there and good coordination. But in a moment, as she clips back into her left side, and it's just so easy for her to pedal forward or backward because she has good hip mobility on that side. And then as she clips into her left side, even as she starts to clip in, you're going to see there she's pedaling forward. And again, just that relatively efficient hip. And as she starts to clip in on her left side, she even just in the process of clipping it, she gets pushed over. And better yet, and I'm just following her here, and that'll be obvious in a minute. You can see right there how she gets pushed over. And again, that's not me pushing her over. There you go. You can see it there. That's her hip limiting her at the top of the pedal stroke and making her quite inefficient on the bike. And then Justin, you can kill it from there. And so we got her a couple of exercises to improve her hip mobility, things that she could do at home, did some treatment with her, and she was pretty impressed. National champion after that with the changes in her abilities to be efficient. Go for it. Some exercises that you can do to improve hip mobility. We have all these on video, by the way. We'll share a link with the team where you can see all these videos. They're going to pop up, including this one here, where you're working on improving hip mobility and core stability. Hit the next one. And this one is probably one of my most powerful ones that we just did. Go ahead and play that. And I'll just talk over it to make it a little bit easier. A really simple exercise to help train core stability. Yeah, will it play? Yeah, actually, it just doesn't want to play. That's okay. You can kind of see it here. What I'm basically doing is I'm training my hip to be able to hinge while I'm working on that core stability, the ability to really engage my trunk through my foot. And again, you'll get the complete video of this. Pop your, if you'll send us an email. If you'll send us an email, we'll send them over, and we'll also send out a link to everybody as we get a lot tighter on time. We'll probably jump through some of these. The next one, once your core is kicking in and you have the ability to engage through, yeah, they're just not going to go, and that's okay for time. Once your core is kicking in and you have the ability to hinge through the hip, the next thing we have to do is engage the big cannon muscles over top of the battleship. So my core is kicking in, the battleship's kicking in this exercise where my left leg is pushing into the ground, my left foot is pushing into the ground, and my right leg is pushing against the wall. It's an amazing gluteus medius exercise. The ability to keep your knee straight very much depends upon your glute med. Your ability to put power down through the pedal very much depends upon your glutes as a whole. Most cyclists who end up with knee pain have some amount of gluteal amnesia syndrome, and they can't engage their glutes and their core efficiently. And this exercise is one of my favorites. And there's multiple ways of progressing and or regressing this kind of pushing your right leg up against the wall and or moving the torso on top of it. A really simple exercise to do, but challenging to do good form. And then hit the next one. Taking that one step further, now you can use your glute med, you can use your glutes, you can use your core, but can you pull on the handlebars and be able to engage the stability down below with the strength up above? And whether you're doing a row with a band or some kettlebell swings, or in this case a kettlebell row, you have to be able to get your knee over top of the pedal, get your body weight over top of the spindle, and then an efficient trunk and efficient core, and then move your body with all that stability and efficiency. And this is essentially the same exercise, the kettlebell being a little bit harder than the band, but they're both valuable. I want to point out the foot here, because if the foot isn't stable, now you've got a loosey-goosey, unstable arch, and you're trying to produce a lot of power down through that canoe. Remember, the foot can be a canoe too, unless you make the foot a battleship, unless you integrate the deep intrinsic muscles of the foot. That arch isn't able to become an efficient, stable lever. So the foot can become a canoe as well. So you have to remember to engage the foot. You actually see the professional rider, the tip go rider on the left, and look at her foot versus the rider on the right, and look at her foot. And Susie's foot on the right is just much more connected. And I've lost her name now, the Tipco rider on the left. Next one. And then finally, now you're able to put all that together, and can you actually take that and put that stability onto the bike? So if you can imagine me now sitting literally on the bike here, and you're riding along the bike, you're safe, you feel comfortable doing this. So please, please don't do this and watch the road. So you're sitting on the bike and you're riding down the road. Can you actually load the pedals up through your core and unweight one hand without getting heavy in the other hand? So this is a functional core stability exercise. Can you lift up one hand just a little bit, just an inch or so, without loading the other hand? Meaning that other hand that's still on the handlebar should still feel pretty light. Your neck should still be relaxed, because all of your body weight is going down through the pedal, just like you were when you're doing that bent over row. All of your body weight is hinging through the hip and pushing on the pedal, as opposed to landing in the handlebar. So many of our clients lose power and efficiency because their weight is going into their handlebars, their neck hurts. Their weight is going into the handlebars, their steering is bad. Their weight is going into the handlebars, their power is low, as opposed to really being able to unload your handlebars and take all of that long lever arm of your torso and drop it into the pedal. So each one of these are successively increasing exercises. And this last one is, quote, so easy, but so hard to do it well. Go on to the next one. And I think that's my last one.
Yep.
And we're jumping into shoes and cleats, which we're going to jump out of, I think.
Yep.
Perfect. So let's jump into a couple of more questions. Yeah, actually, pause, jump back one more moment. Let me actually go here. So Eric, hit the play button on that if it'll play. Eric had an unstable foot, and because he couldn't activate his foot, you'll watch his right knee drop in. Go ahead and hit that button again for me. But when he started to find his foot, when he actually got the core of his foot together, and you'll see him do it here in a moment, when his brain and the software reloaded the stability of an anchored foot with a good arch, now watch what happens to his knee. Professional elite level cyclist not able to engage the core of his foot and driving some knee pain because of it. And that's just really critical. Go ahead and hit the next one for me. And so when he would push, I guess, so what most cyclists want, go ahead and hit it, that's fine. And what most cyclists want, then they walk in the door, they want this. And what we usually offer them is this. Yeah. Yeah, right. So we offer you, whether it's a bike fit that progresses over time, a bike fit's not one and done, or whether it's physical therapy, it's like brushing your teeth. It's something that we're going to need to do over time to get your body in a healthier place, or to get the bike fit in a healthier place. So, this is a process, as Sean would tell you, that it's doing the strength training, doing the flexibility, coming back in for the follow-up fit, as opposed to, we can't heal you, but it's so many times we help people get to the place where they feel better. Go ahead and hit the next one. So it might just be time for a bike fit, a checkup, a physical therapy assessment to figure out what your limiters are and figure out those places on your body where there's some dragging breaks. Go ahead and hit the next one. Because the consequences today are determined by the actions of your past. And if you guys want different futures, you might just need to change what you're currently doing. And that happens for so many of us. To be able to address our limiters it's just such a bummer to work on all the things that don't feel fun, like going out and riding our bikes. But to figure out what the limiters are, whether it's a bike fit or whether it's a body fit, well, it can make the real difference in untying the things that are limiting you from getting better. And I think that's it. Go ahead and hit the next one. Yeah. And to get out of the hole means you just got to stop digging, essentially. Yeah. Love that. Yeah, stop wasting time and figuring out those limiters. Great. So let's pause there, catch a couple of questions. Thanks everybody for sticking around as we go past. And let me catch a couple of questions here. And let me find them. Sorry, everybody. There's a question about doing a fit on the rollers versus on a static trainer. We generally start with a static trainer, though we do have clients that have that ability to be on rollers, and we will occasionally go there. We've got some sets of them, and it's certainly nice to be able to see people in a dynamic way as opposed to just in a static way. That's a really nice observation, because our bike fit certainly changes once we get moving underneath there. And then Justin, for you, what are the trade-offs in a fore-aft cleat position regarding power on the bike? Any opinions on fore-aft on the cleats from a power standpoint?
Yeah, the general sense in current thinking is you're going to get the cleat about a centimeter behind the center of the first metatarsal head, the ball of the foot. The idea is, if you can think of this is the ball of the foot and this is the outside of the foot, you want that pedal spindle to basically bisect that arch. So it's living just a little bit behind there. But there are some trade-offs. It's going to reduce the ability of the ankle to articulate. It tends to emphasize a little bit more of a toe down pedaling style, which tends to be the way that we pedal anyway. It's just the nature of it. It also builds some inherent stability into the foot by virtue of just shortening the lever arm of the foot. And it can feel more powerful when the cleat's a little bit farther back. I've certainly had that experience and had bike fit clients tell me that as well. It is something that can be an effective way to help improve power transfer, or at least the sensation of power transfer. It also helps reduce pressure on the toes and foot issues. So there's a lot of reasons why going a little bit back is good. A lot of reasons why going a little bit forward probably not as good. It really depends on the rider, but generally you're going to err on the side of a centimeter or so behind the ball of the foot.
Perfect. So with that, there's a couple other questions, but I want to officially start to wrap it up, and we're here to hang on and catch a couple of more. But what we're offering to Penn Velo, if you sign up for a bike fit, sign up, not necessarily get in because we're kind of booked at the moment. But if you sign up for a bike fit inside of the next month, we'll do 10% off. So get your name on the roster, and we're offering a 10% discount for our bike fit services, whether they be in person or not. So please get out there. And then as we have a bunch of questions, I really would love to catch these questions, and we'd be happy to literally get on the phone with you. We are doing free check-ins, meaning get on the phone with us or just a screen and chat through a couple of things. So email us with questions, give us a call, and we'll get back into you. But we'll answer a couple more why people are willing to hang on. Sean, are you okay with that? Us catching a couple of these questions, even as we're now at 8:08?
Yeah, what I want to do is let people know that, because since we're past, first I want to thank and everybody, on behalf of everybody who's listening, thank you to Curtis and Justin for your expertise and for sharing your knowledge with us. If I was going to just summarize what I always learn listening to you guys, but if I was going to summarize, it's that, it's sort of the intersection of mobility, anatomy, and bike geometry to figure out what works. And it's a really complicated problem, which you can summarize with the old grade school saying of, the hip bones connected to the knee bone, connected to the ankle bone, like everything's really connected. And so like having people to measure it objectively to figure out what that optimal, it's always trying to optimize different constraining variables. And I think if anything, people hopefully got that you need experts to help you figure that out. It's hard to just take a simple rule like 1 centimeter behind the metatarsal. Like it just doesn't work when you take all the other parts of the body. So thank you for at least getting us that enduring lesson. And I wanted to let everybody know that if people can stay, we'll stay on for at least another, as long as Curtis and Justin will kind of answer questions. But if people have to drop off, I will be recording this and I will post the links. I will also post the ways to contact Revolutions in Fitness for that, kind of introductory follow-up that Curtis just offered. So I'll get this out. So if you have to take off, you can, but please, you're welcome to stay, and I'll turn it back to Curtis and Justin.
Awesome, thanks. Again, just to mention, we are very happy to chat. We're doing just some free phone calls and some video fit consultation pieces to help people answer these questions, especially in this time of the pandemic where it can be challenging to get in. So let's see if we can catch a couple of these. Right. I find that over the course of a ride, I'll notice that I've slid forward on my saddle. Is that an indication of a stem that's too long, a saddle that's too far back, poor flexibility, all the above? My knee is over the pedal spindle. Justin, thank you, Dan, for the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably is a little bit of all of the above. One of the things that I like to talk with people about when they're doing a fit is that, people ask, well, where should I sit on the saddle? And to a certain extent, we're going to self-select. You're not going to sit somewhere that's uncomfortable. But when you are focusing on performance and you find yourself changing your position over time because almost certainly just because you unconsciously are moving there, there's a reason for that. And definitely would want to look into it. The first place my brain would go would be just to try to move the saddle forward a little bit if you are uncomfortable on the saddle. The bigger question is you do notice you're sliding forward on the saddle, is it uncomfortable? Does it cause problems? It may be that's where you are most comfortable on the bike. And sometimes it's really nice to get some objective feedback on your position, but performance is a really strong indicator of what works, and it can be a really helpful guide to getting you into a better place. So certainly look into all those things: stem, saddle fore aft, flexibility, and see if there's anything that looks like it's out of order or wrong. But the reality is if you're performing well and you're comfortable, and that's pretty good evidence that it's working, at least on some level.
Yeah. And if you're sliding around and you're constantly finding yourself in a different position, making a reasonable estimation about what's going on is reasonable, as we did. And if you're not assessing, you're guessing. So as Sean said, it's a complicated process, but it's reasonable to think that you're putting out power and it's okay. But if you're finding yourself moving around and relatively unstable on the bike, there might be something better there. There was a quick question, and then I think we'll finish with with two more here, and then we'll jump. Why is the bars to saddle measurement typically done from the tip of the saddle? Seems to me that you want to fit relative to the spot where you're sitting, a bit further forward. So in short, AMM technical, it's totally just one way of measuring that's relatively standard, and it's easy to be consistent with that measurement. It says nothing, the measurements that you pull off the bike says nothing about the way you're sitting on the bike or what your body position is. It is purely just a way to document the bike. So I have had clients pull off, or we pulled off to the saddle, but it's an inconsistent way to pull to the, some guesstimated place that you're sitting on the saddle. So it's purely just a picture of the position relative to a picture of your body. The picture of your body are the knee angles that we take, the biomechanics we measure, etc. And then the other one that kind of ties into that is the pressure mapping question, which is the accuracy that we are practically able to center the pressure map on the saddle within plus or minus of a millimeter. Now, you can't get that. Every time we put the pattern back on, it's not going to be plus or minus a millimeter, but it's really obvious when someone is sitting on a saddle and they're either unstable on the saddle or they've got a big hot pressure map spot that shows up as red with a lot of force. You can see changes over time from one saddle position or one bike fit position to the next, even if you're not putting that mat back on plus or minus even 2 or 3 millimeters, honestly. So with that, as we're here at a quarter after, I think it's a good place to pause. And I want to catch these questions. I'm going to drop our email down below. And as I said, all of those videos we're going to send out as well. And you can actually watch me going through the exercises. We also have a YouTube channel where you can catch a bunch of other cycling specific exercises. Anything else what else do you have to add in, Justin?
No, yeah, absolutely. I think you're going to put the Bike Fit email in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, drop a line to Bike Fit, and certainly take advantage of the opportunity to sign up for a half an hour Bike Fit consultation. We can set up a video call or a phone call. Happy to check in and just explore some of the issues that people are bringing up, and we can talk about ways to help. And that's been just a really wonderful thing to be able to do to help people. We've really connected people with some great solutions that way.
And well, I just dropped sorry, go for it, Sean.
No, go ahead, Curtis.
I just dropped that information in the chat box for everybody. Bike Fit at Revolutions in Fitness, half an hour free bike consultation, and then 10% off your next service with RIF, Revolutions in Fitness, if you're scheduled inside of the month.
Well, with that, I want to thank the we had 32 people. We had over 50 at one point, and 30 stuck around the extra time. So I really want to thank everybody who joined, and especially thank over video. We'll give you verbal claps and verbal thumbs up to let you know. Yes, thank you so much to Curtis and Justin and to the Revolutions in Fitness team. We really appreciate learning from you, and we hope we can do this again. So thanks everybody, and
awesome.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you. We'll answer your questions via email. Please send them on and via phone. Good night, everybody.
All right. I turned off the video, but